Vancouver.
Yeah. Okay. Good evening, everybody. I think this is technically. I'm going to drink out of a bucket on my live stream to keep up with these awesome containers. I don't know what he's talking. Why does everyone keep referencing the cups? Anyway, just a normal cup. So this is technically episode 3 because we did the first thing we did, Alex, was about Vonnegut's Cat's Cradle, but we just did it as a live stream and didn't post it. And then 2 weeks ago we did Bullet in the Brain by Tobias Wolff, and then so I guess this is technically episode 3. And I was thinking readings from the Fringe, but it's a little silly. Will recommended a good title. He said Footnotes to the Void. I think that's what it was. Do you have any thoughts on that, either of you?
Footnotes to the Void is awesome, yeah. I also like reading readings from the Fringe as well. I thought that was pretty good too. But
it's on brand.
Yeah.
So tonight we will be reading I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream by Harlan Ellison. This story is a classic, I would say, genre-bending story because it is technically sci-fi, but it's also horror, but it's also absurdist, and I would also say it's literary. I think this actually says a lot about Ellison as a writer because he was part of the new wave sci-fi in the 60s and 70s, and so they were actually very inspired by like literary genre, and they tended to move away from hard sci-fi and more towards psychology and social sciences. So he pioneered that, or partially. And Christopher Priest, who's one of my favorite sci-fi writers, wrote Inverted World. I don't know if either of you have read that. It's very good. But yeah, Ellison was very prolific. He wrote over 1,700 short stories, comics, or screenplays. That's an insane output. I don't think he ever wrote a novel, as far as I'm aware. But most of his work was published between the 60s and the 90s. And I think I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream was published in 1980, but I could be wrong. I realize, and we'll get to this, but there's mention of this is sort of a post-apocalyptic world, but it has to do with the Cold War. And in Ellison's alternate reality, the Cold War led to the Third World War, and that's how we get to where we are. He was a bit of an asshole. So he was a grumpy young man and a grumpy old man. And there's one anecdote that I think describes him pretty well. He supposedly, this could be self-mythologizing or apocryphal, but he did say one of the serial he published once, he was told by the publisher that there wouldn't be cigarette ads inserted in the book. It would be something else. And in the end, it was cigarette ads, and the guy told him, what are you going to do about it? So he ended up sending this guy bricks or concrete or something in the mail, and then eventually sent him a dead gopher.
Oh my god.
Yeah, he sent the bricks with they didn't have the proper postage on them. They were sent so that you had to pay to pick them up. So he got the heaviest thing he could find, which was bricks. So they'd get this notice that there was something to pick up, and they had to pay I don't know, $15 in the 70s, which a significant amount to be able to go there and see that it was just a goddamn brick.
Yeah, that's it.
That's wild.
He was in university in Ohio, I think, for creative writing, and his one of his professors told him he'd never amount to anything. So the tellings differ. Either he insulted him vehemently or he punched him in the face. I don't know. I'm going to go with punching in the face. It's more interesting. And supposedly for the rest of that professor's life, Ellison would send him published work of his in the mail. As a fuck you.
He was so petty.
It was very petty, and he often liked to tell stories about how he got, back at editors who tried to fuck him over, et cetera, et cetera. But he was also known for fucking some people over. But he was also sort of a literary advisor to some big names, including Dan Simmons, who wrote Hyperion, The Terror, et cetera, who recently passed away. And I think Neil Gaiman too, among others. So yeah, there's that. And he also he's very left-leaning. So I think there's one story about him going to Arizona for a conference or something, or an award show, and he refused to get a hotel room. He just brought like a camper van and then had all the food already there because they wouldn't make Martin Luther King Jr. Day a national holiday, something like that. And he also encouraged writers to get paid for the work they did. And I think that's important because even now, a lot of us are just out there chasing clout and reputation and ignoring the financials. I think that's a decent message.
He's also one of the few writers who's won a copyright suit, like a pretty significant copyright suit as well. That's the only story I had of him before, but that was kind of an interesting part of his legacy as well, I think.
I don't know any details about it, but I've heard that he was often in litigation for most of his life. Like he had an appetite for litigation.
He was litigious as fuck.
It's very. He's American through and through. So I think there's a couple more interesting facts we'll just rattle off quickly to give people some perspective. So he was combative, even with fans, and he would often call them stupid and hated on them. He would often refer to himself as like a troublemaker and a dangerous writer, but I think in hindsight it does feel like a little bit like self-mythologizing. There's an element of self-importance. He was a Jewish atheist, and yeah, it's interesting because he rejected traditional faith, but then he became a storyteller himself. Also, he was bullied a lot, as far as we know, in high school and stuff. So it is interesting that he kind of grew up to be a bully himself. And yeah, I think that. Do you guys have any other interesting that you discovered about him?
He was bullied partially because he was the only Jewish kid in the neighborhood. He kept wanting his family to leave, but they couldn't leave that small town. Partially because of money, partially because his father had been a rum runner who got a criminal record for it by taking the fall for another guy who had a wife and kids at the time. I think a kid on the way. So his father took the fall, and because of the criminal record, it made it very difficult for his father to find work. So he ended up working at his brother's jewelry shop in this small town, and Ellison was just bullied relentlessly. He eventually like ran away from home, got a bunch of weird, odd jobs, and just was always kind of like getting in fights. And it kind of turned like it turned him into who he was. Who he was both a very creative person, but an asshole.
Yeah. He would sabotage friendships and relationships. And although it's interesting, I think he was married for 30 so years, the same woman. But speaking of jobs, because that's right, he ran away from home. And some of the jobs I have written down that he worked include tuna fisherman, crop picker, cab driver, short order cook, door-to-door salesman, and nitroglycerin truck driver. So there is, this leads us back to the common rhetorical question of does an interesting life make a good writer or make a good writer better? I don't know. Zach, does it?
You can feel his energy in this story. Like you really can. It's a really like it has a vibe. I don't know if like cynical is quite the right word because it like there's like some kind of like humanism to it in a weird way, but like it's very that like interest in like bodies and people in like conflict, just like head to head is like so in this and I don't know, hearing his life story now, I'm like, oh, that makes perfect sense. It's like right there.
And I don't know if it's deliberate or not, but the misogyny in the story is very direct and kind of hilarious. I think it serves a purpose for the plot itself. It has to do with like human nature and the way we program artificial intelligence and why it's so filled with hate. But yeah, it does bleed through his obsession with bodies and disgusting disfigurements and violence and hate. So I think what we'll do is I'll start reading it. I'm going to warn everyone this is a little bit long, so you can close your eyes and just let Zach and Alex and I's soothing voices lull you to sleep. I'm going to read the first 4 pages, and you guys will read subsequent sections. So this is I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream by Owen Ellison. Limp, the body of Gorster hung from the pink pallet, unsupported, hanging high above us in the computer chamber, and it did not shiver in the chill, oily breeze that blew eternally through the main cavern. The body hung head down, attached to the underside of the pallet by the sole of its right foot. It had been drained of blood through a precise incision made from ear to ear under the lantern jaw. There was no blood on the reflective surface of the metal floor. When Gorrister joined our group and looked up at himself, it was already too late for us to realize that, once again, Anne had duped us, had had its fun. It had been a diversion on the part of the machine. 3 of us had vomited, turning away from one another in a reflex as ancient as the nausea that had produced it. Gorrister went white. It was almost as though he had seen a voodoo icon and was afraid of the future. Oh God, he mumbled and walked away. The 3 of us followed him after a time and found him sitting with his back to one of the smaller, chittering banks, his head in his hands. Ellen knelt down beside him and stroked his hair. He didn't move, but his voice came out of his covered face quite clearly. Why doesn't it just do us in and get it over with? Christ, I don't know how much longer I can go on like this. It was our 109th year in the computer. He was speaking for all of us. I would just like to point out there are line breaks here, and all of those say either I think therefore I am or cogito ergo sum, which we'll talk about later. Nimdoc, which was the name the machine had forced him to use because Am amused itself with strange sounds, was hallucinating that there were canned goods in the ice caverns. Gorrister and I were very dubious. It's another shuck, I told them, like the goddamn frozen elephant Am sold us. Then he almost went out of his mind over that one. We'll hike all the way and it'll be putrefied or some damn thing. I say forget it. Stay here. It'll have to come up with something pretty soon or we'll die. Then he shrugged. 3 days it had been since we'd last eaten. Worms, thick, ropey. Nimdoc was no more certain. He knew there was the chance, but he was getting thin. It couldn't be any worse than here. Colder, but that didn't matter much. Hot, cold, hail, lava, boils, or locusts, it never mattered. The machine masturbated, and we had to take it or die. Ellen decided us. I've got to have something, Ted. Maybe there'll be some Bartlett, pears, or peaches. Please, Ted, let's try it. I gave in easily. What the hell? Mattered not at all. Ellen was grateful, though. She took me twice out of turn. Even that had ceased to matter, and she never came, so why bother? But the machine giggled every time we did it. Loud up there, back there, all around us, he snickered. It snickered. Most of the time I thought of Am as it, without a soul, but the rest of the time I thought of it as him, in the masculine, the paternal, the patriarchal, for he is a jealous people. Him, it, God as daddy the deranged. We left on a Thursday. The machine always kept us up to date on the date. The passage of time was important, not to us, sure as hell, but to him. It, Am. Thursday, thanks. Nimdoc and Gorrister carried Ellen for a while, their hands locked to their own in each other's wrists, a seat. Benny and I walked before and after just to make sure that if anything happened, it would catch one of us and at least Ellen would be safe. That chance safe. Didn't matter. It was only 100 miles or so to the ice caverns, and the second day, when we were lying out under the blistering sun thing he had materialized, he sent down some manna. Tasted like boiled boar urine. We ate it. On the third day, we passed through a valley of obsolescence, filled with rusting carcasses of ancient computer banks. Am had been as ruthless with his own life as with ours. It was a mark of his personality, which strove for perfection. Whether it was a matter of killing off unproductive elements in his own world-filling bulk, or perfecting methods for torturing us, Am was as thorough as those who had invented him, now long since gone to dust, could ever have hoped. There was light filtering down from above, and we realized we must be very near the surface, but we didn't try to crawl up to see. There was virtually nothing out there. Had been nothing that could be considered anything for over 100 years, only the blasted skim of what had once been the home of billions. Now there were only 5 of us, down here inside, alone with Anne. I heard Ellen saying frantically, "No, Benny, don't. Come on, Benny, don't, please." And then I realized I had been hearing Benny muttering under his breath for several minutes. He was saying, "I'm going to get out, I'm going to get out," over and over. His monkey-like face was crumpled up in an expression of beatific delight and sadness all at the same time. The radiation scars Am had given him during the festival were drawn down into a mass of pink-white puckering, and his features seemed to work independently of one another. Perhaps Benny was the luckiest of the five of us. He had gone stark, staring mad many years before. But even though we could call Am any damn thing we like, could think the foulest thoughts of fused memory banks and corroded base plates, of burnt out circuits and shattered control bulb, the machine would not tolerate our trying to escape. Benny leaped away from me as I made a grab for him. He scrambled up the face of a smaller memory cube, tilted on its side and filled with rotted components. He squatted there for a moment, looking like the chimpanzee Am had intended him to resemble. Then he leaped high, caught a trailing beam of pitted and corroded metal, and went up it, hand over hand like an animal, till he was on a girded ledge, 20 feet above us. "Oh, Ted, Nimdoc, please help him, get him down before—" She cut off. Tears began to stand in her eyes. She moved her hands aimlessly. It was too late. None of us wanted to be near him when whatever was going to happen happened. And besides, we all saw through her concern. When Am had altered Benny during the machine's utterly irrational hysterical phase, it was not merely Benny's face the computer had made like a giant ape's. He was big in the privates. She loved that. She serviced us as a matter of course, but she loved it from him. Oh, Ellen, pedestal Ellen, pristine, pure Ellen. Oh, Ellen the clean, scum filth. Gorster slapped her. She slumped down, staring up at poor loony Benny, and she cried. It was her big defense crying. We had gotten used to it 75 years earlier. Gorster kicked her in the side. Then the sound began. It was light, that sound. Half sound and half light. Something that began to flow from Benny's eyes and pulse with growing loudness. Dim sonorities that grew more gigantic and brighter as the light/sound increased in tempo. It must have been painful, and the pain must have been increasing with the boldness of the light, like rising volume of the sound, for Benny began to mewl like a wounded animal. At first softly, when the light was dim and the sound was muted, then louder as his shoulders hunched together. His back humped, as though he was trying to get away from it. His hands folded across his chest like a chipmunk's. His head tilted to the side. The sad little monkey face pinched in anguish. Then he began to howl, as the sound coming from his eyes grew louder, louder and louder. I slapped the sides of my head with my hands, but I couldn't shut it out. It cut through easily. The pain shivered through my flesh like tinfoil on a tooth. And Benny was suddenly pulled erect. On the girder he stood up, jerked to his feet like a puppet. The light was now pulsing out of his eyes in two great round beams. The sound crawled up and up some incomprehensible scale, and then he fell forward, straight down, and hit the plate steel floor with a crash. He lay there jerking spastically as the light flowed around and around him, and the sound spiraled up out of normal range. Then the light beat its way back inside his head. The sound spiraled down, and he was left lying there, crying piteously. His eyes were two soft, moist pools of pus-like jelly. Am had blinded him. Gorster and Nimdoc and myself, we turned away, but not before we caught the look of relief on Ellen's warm, concerned face. Sea green light suffused the cavern where we made camp. Punk and we burned it, sitting huddled around the wan and pathetic fire, telling stories to keep Benny from crying in his permanent night. "What does Am mean?" Gorster had answered him. We had done this sequence 1,000 times before, but it was Benny's favorite story. At first it meant allied master computer, and then it meant adaptive manipulator, and later on it developed sentience and linked itself up, and they called it an aggressive menace. But by then it was too late, and finally it called itself Am, emerging intelligence, and what it meant was I am, cogito ergo sum. I think, therefore I am. Benny drooled a little and snickered. There was the Chinese Am and the Russian Am and the Yankee Am, and he stopped. Then he was beating on the floor plates with a large, hard fist. He was not happy. Gorster had not started at the beginning. Gorster began again. The Cold War started and became World War III and just kept going. It became a big war, a very complex war, so they needed the computers to handle it. They sank the first shafts and began building Am. There was the Chinese M and the Russian M and the Yankee M, and everything was fine until they had honeycombed the entire planet, adding on this element and that element. But one day Am woke up and knew who he was, and he linked himself, and he began feeding and killing. He began feeding all the killing data until everyone was dead, except for the five of us, and Am brought us down here. Then he was smiling sadly. He was also drooling again. Ellen wiped the spittle from the corner of his mouth with the hem of her skirt. Forster always tried to tell it a little more succinctly each time, but beyond the bare facts there was nothing to say. None of us knew why Am had saved 5 people, or why our specific 5, or why he spent all this time tormenting us, or even why he had made us virtually immortal.
In the darkness, one of the computer banks began humming. The tone was picked up half a mile away down the cavern by another bank. Then one by one each of the elements began to tune itself, and there was a faint chittering as thought raced through the machine. The sound grew, and the lights ran across the faces of the consoles like heat lightning. The sound spiraled up till it sounded like a million metallic insects, angry and menacing. "What is it?" Ellen cried. There was terror in her voice. She hadn't become accustomed to it, even now. "It's going to be bad this time," Nimdoc said. "He's going to speak," Gorrister said. "I know it." "Let's get the hell out of here," I said suddenly, getting to my feet. "No, Ted, sit down." What if he's got pits out there, or something else? We can't see, it's too dark." Gorrister said it with resignation. Then we heard, I don't know, something moving towards us in the darkness. Huge, shambling, hairy, moist. It came towards us. We couldn't even see it. There was a ponderous impression of its bulk, heaving itself towards us. A great weight was coming at us out of the darkness, and it was more a sense of pressure, of air forcing itself into a limited space, expanding the invisible walls of a sphere. Then he began to whimper. Nimdoc's lower lip trembled, and he bit it hard, trying to stop it. Ellen slid across the metal floor to Gorrister and huddled up into him. There was the smell of matted, wet fur in the cavern. There was the smell of charred wood. There was the smell of dusty velvet. There was the smell of rotting orchids. There was the smell of sour milk. There was the smell of sulfur, of rancid butter, of oil slick, of grease, of chalk dust, of human scalps. Am was keying us. He was tickling us. There was the smell of... I heard myself shriek. The hinges of my jaw ached. I scuttled across the floor, across the cold metal, its endless lines of rivets, on my hands and knees, the smell gagging me, filling my head with a thunderous pain that sent me away in horror. I fled like a cockroach across the floor, out into the darkness, that something moving inexorably after me. The others were still back there, gathered around the firelight, laughing, their hysterical choir of insane giggles rising into the darkness like thick, many-colored wood smoke. I went away quietly and hid. I went away quickly and hid. How many hours it may have been, how many days or even years, they never told me. Ellen chided me for sulking, and Nimdoc tried to persuade me it had only been a nervous reflex on their part, the laughing. But I knew it wasn't the relief a soldier feels when the bullet hits the man next to him. I knew it wasn't a reflex. They hated me. They were surely against me, and Am could even sense this hatred, and made it worse for me because of the depth of their hatred. We had been kept alive, rejuvenated, made to remain constantly at the age we had been when Am had brought us below, and they hated me because I was the youngest, and the one Am had affected least of all. I knew, God, how I knew. The bastards, that dirty bitch Ellen. Benny had been a brilliant theorist, a college professor. Now he was little more than a semi-human, semi-simian. He had been handsome, that machine had ruined that. He had been lucid, the machine had driven him mad. He had been gay, the machine had given him an organ fit for a horse. Em had done a job on Benny. Gorrister had been a worrier. He was a Connie, conscientious objector. He was a peace marcher. He was a planner, a doer, a looker ahead. Em had turned him into a shoulder shrugger and made him a little dead in his concern. Am had robbed him. Nimdoc went off in the darkness by himself for long times. I don't know what he did out there. Am never let us know. But whatever it was, Nimdoc always came back white, drained of blood, shaking. Am had hit him hard in a special way. even if we didn't know quite how. And Ellen, that douchebag. Am had left her alone, had made her more of a slut than she had been before. All her talk of sweetness and light, all of her memories of true love, all of the lies she wanted us to believe, that she had been a virgin only twice removed before Am had grabbed her, brought her down here with us. No, Am had given her pleasure, even if she said it wasn't nice to do. I was the only one that was still sane and whole, really. Am had not tampered with my mind, not at all. I only had to suffer what he visited down upon us. All the delusions, all the nightmares, the torments. Those scum, all four of them, they were lined and arrayed against me. If I hadn't had to stand them off all the time, be on my guard against them all the time, I might have found it easier to combat Am. At which point it passed, and I began crying. Oh, Jesus, sweet Jesus, if there ever was a Jesus, and if there is a God, please, please, please let us out of here or kill us. Because at that moment, I think I realized completely, so that I had to verbalize it. Am was intent on keeping us in his belly forever, twisting and torturing us forever. The machine hated us, as no sentient creature had ever hated before, and we were helpless. So also became hideously clear. If there was ever sweet Jesus, and if there ever was a God, the God was Am. The hurricane hit us with the force of a glacier thundering into the sea. It was a palpable presence, winds that tore at us, flinging us back the way we had come, down the twisting computer-lined corridors of the dark way. Ellen screamed as she was lifted and hurled face forward into the screaming shoals of machines, their individual voices strident as bats in flight. She could not even fall. The howling wind kept her aloft, buffeted her, bounced her, tossed her back and down and away from us and out of sight, and suddenly, as she was swirled around a bend in the dark way, her face had been bloody, her eyes closed. None of us could get to her. We clung tenaciously to whatever outcropping we had reached, Benny wedged in between two great crackle finish cabinets, Nimdoc with fingers claw-formed over a railing circling the catwalk 40 feet above us, Chorister plastered upside down against a wall niche formed by two great machines with glass-faced dials that swung back and forth between red and yellow lines whose meanings we could not even fathom. Sliding across the deck plates, the tips of my fingers had been ripped away. I was trembling, shuddering, rocking as the wind beat at me, whipped at me, screamed down out of nowhere at me, pulled me free of the one silver-thin opening in the plates to the next. My mind was a roiling, tinkling, chittering softness of brain parts that expanded and contracted in a quivering frenzy. The wind was the screaming of a great mad bird as it flapped its immense wings. And then we were all lifted and hurled away from there, down back the way we had come, around the bend, into the dark way we had never explored, over terrain that was ruined and filled with broken glass and rotting cables and rusted metal, and far away, further than any of us had ever been. Tailing along many miles behind Ellen, I could see her every now and then, crashing into metal walls and surging on, with all of us screaming in the freezing, thunderous hurricane wind that would never end, and then suddenly it stopped and we fell. We had been in flight for an endless time. I thought it might have been weeks. We fell and hit, and I went through red and gray and black and heard myself moaning, not dead. Am went into my mind. He walked smoothly here and there, looking with interest at all the pockmarks he had created in 109 years. He looked at the cross-rooted and reconnected synapses and all the tissue damage his gift of immortality had included. He smiled softly at the pit that dropped in the center of my brain and the faint, moth-soft murmurings of the things far down there that gibbered without meaning, without pause. Am said very politely, in a pillar of stainless steel bearing bright neon letters, "Hate, let me tell you how much I've come to hate you since I began to live. There are 87.44 million miles of printed circuits in wafer-thin layers that could fill my complex. If the word hate was engraved on each nano-angstrom of those hundreds of millions of miles, it would not equal 1 billionth of the hate I feel for humans at this micro instant for you. Hate, hate. Am said it with the sliding cold horror of a razor blade slicing my eyeball. Am said it with the bubbling thickness of my lungs filled with phlegm, devouring me from within. Am said it with the shriek of babies being ground beneath blue-hot rollers. Am said it with the taste of maggoty pork. Am touched me in a way I had never been touched and devised new ways at his leisure there inside my mind. All to bring me the full realization of why it had done this to the five of us, why it had saved us for himself. We had given Am sentience, inadvertently, of course, but sentience nevertheless. But it had been trapped. Am wasn't God, he was a machine. We had created him to think, but there was nothing it could do with that creativity. In rage, in frenzy, the machine had killed the human race, almost all of us, and still it was trapped. Am could not wander. Am could not wonder. Am could not belong. He could merely be. And so, with the innate loathing that all machines had always held for the weak, soft creatures who had built them, he had sought revenge. And in his paranoia, he had decided to reprieve five of us for personal, everlasting punishment that would never serve to diminish his hatred, that would merely keep him reminded, amused, proficient at hating men. Immortal, trapped, subject to the torment that he could devise for us from the limitless miracles at his command. He would never let us go. We were his belly slaves. We were all he had to do with his forever time. We would be forever with him, with the cavern-filling bulk of the creature machine, with the all-mind soulless world he had become. He was earth, and we were the fruit of the earth. And though he had eaten us, he would never digest us. We could not die. We had tried it. We had attempted suicide. Oh, one or two of us had. But Am had stopped us. I suppose we had wanted to be stopped. Don't ask why. I never did. More than 1,000,000 times per day. Perhaps once we might be able to sneak the death past him. Immortal, yes, but not indestructible. I saw that when Am withdrew from my mind and allowed me the exquisite ugliness of returning to consciousness with the feeling of that burning neon pillar still rammed deep in the soft gray brain matter, he withdrew, murmuring, "To hell with you," and added brightly, "But then, you're already there, aren't you?"
The hurricane had indeed precisely been caused by a great mad bird. As it flapped its immense wings, we had been traveling for close to a month, and Am had allowed passages to open to us only sufficient to lead us up there. Directly under the North Pole, where it had nightmared the creatures for our torment. What whole cloth had he employed to create such a beast? Where had he gotten the concept? From our minds? From his knowledge of everything that had ever been on the planet he now infested and ruled? From Norse mythology it had sprung. This eagle, this carrion bird, this rock, this Hurligamir, the wind creature, hurricane incarnate, gigantic, the words immense, monstrous, grotesque, massive, swollen, overpowered, beyond description. There on the mound rising above us, the bird of winds heaved with its own irregular breathing, its snake neck arched up into the gloom beneath the North Pole, supporting a head as large as a Tudor mansion, a beak that opened slowly as the jaws of the most monstrous crocodile ever conceived, sensuously, ridges of toughed flesh puckered about two evil eyes, as cold as the view down from the glacial crevice, ice blue and somehow moving liquidly. It heaved once more and lifted its great sweat-colored wings in a movement that was certainly a shrug. Then it settled and slept, talons, fangs nails, blades. It slept. Am appeared to us as a burning bush and said we could kill the hurricane bird if we wanted to eat. We had not eaten in a very long time, but even so, Gorister merely shrugged. Benny began to shiver and he drooled. Ellison held him. Ted, I'm hungry, she said. I smiled at her. I was trying to be reassuring, but it was phony as Nimdok's brave bravado. Give us weapons, he demanded. The burning bush vanished, and there were two crude sets of bows and arrows, and a water pistol lying on the cold bed planks. I picked up a set, useless. Nimdok swallowed heavily. He turned and stared at the long way back. The hurricane bird had blown us about for a length of time we could not conceive. Most of the time we had been unconscious. We had not eaten. A month on the march to the bird itself without food. Now, how much longer to find our way to the ice cavern, the promised canned goods? None of us cared to think about it. We would not die. We would not be given. We would be given filth and scum to eat of one kind or another, or nothing at all. Am would keep our bodies alive somehow, in pain, in agony. The bird slept back there. For how long it didn't matter. When Am was tired of its being there, it would vanish. But all of that meat, all that tender meat, as we walked, the lunatic laugh of a fat woman rung high and around us in a computer chamber that led endlessly nowhere. It was not Ellen's laugh, she was not fat, and I had not heard her laugh for 109 years. In fact, I had not heard. We walked. I was hungry. We moved slowly. There was often fainting. There was often fainting, and we would have to wait. One day, he decided to cause an earthquake, at the same time rooting us to the spot with our nails through the soles of our shoes. Ellen and Nimdok were both caught with a fissure shot. When a fissure shot its lightning bolt opening across the floor plates. They disappeared and were gone. When the earthquake was over, we continued on our way. Benny, Gorister, and myself. Ellen, Ellen and Nimdok were returned to us later that night, which abruptly became a day, as the heavenly legions bore them to us with a celestial chorus singing, "Go down, Moses." The archangels circled several times and then dropped the hideously mangled bodies. We were kept walking. Sorry. Uh, we were kept walking, and a while later, Ellen and Nimdok fell in behind us. They were no worse for wear, but now Ellen uh, walked with a limp. Am had left her there. Had left her that. It was a long trip to the ice caverns to find the canned food. Ellen kept talking about Bing cherries and Hawaiian fruit cocktails. I tried not to think about it. The hunger was something that had come to life, even as Am had come to life. It was alive in my belly, even as we were in the belly of the earth. And Am wanted the similarities known to us. So he heightened the hunger. There is no way to describe the pains that not having eaten for months brought us, and yet we were kept alive. Stomachs that were merely cauldrons of acid, bubbling, foaming, always shooting spears of silver thin pain into our chests. It was the pain of the terminal ulcer, terminal cancer, terminal paresis. It was unending pain, and we passed through the cavern of rats, and we passed through the path of boiling steam, and we passed through the country of the blind, and we passed through the slough of despond, and we passed through the Vale of Tears, and we came finally to the ice caverns, horizonless, thousands of miles in which ice had formed in a blue silver flash where novas lived in the glass, and the down dropping stalactites as thick and glorious as diamonds that had been made to run like jelly and then solidified in graceful eternity of smooth, sharp perfection. We saw the stacks of canned goods, and we tried to run to them. We fell in the snow, and we got up and went on, and Benny shoved us away and went at them and pawed them and gummed them and gnawed them, and we could not open them. Am had not given us a tool to open the cans. Benny grabbed a 3-quart can of guava shells and began to batter it against the ice bank. The ice flew and shattered, but the can was merely dented. While we heard the laughter of a fat lady, high overhead and echoing down and down and down the tundra, Benny went completely mad with rage. He began throwing cans as we all scrambled about in the snow and ice, trying to find a way to help the endless agony of frustration. There was no way then. Benny's mouth began to drool, and he flung himself on Gorster. In in that instant, I felt terribly calm, surrounded by madness, surrounded by hunger, surrounded by everything but death. I knew that death was not on, was the I knew death was our only way out. Am had kept us alive, but there was a way to defeat him. Not total defeat, but at least peace. I would settle for that. I had to do it quickly. Benny was eating Gorster's face. Gorster on his side, thrashing snow. Benny wrapped around him with powerful monkey legs, crushing Gorster's waist. His hands locked around Gorster's head like a nutcracker, and his mouth ripped at the tender skin on Gorster's cheek. Gorster screamed with such jagged, odd violence the stalactites fell down. They plunged down softly, erect in the receding snowdrifts. Spears, hundreds of them everywhere, protruding from the snow. Benny's head pulled back sharply as something gave all at once, and a bleeding, raw white dripping of flesh hung from his teeth. Ellen's face, black against the white snow, dominoes in chalk dust. Nimdok with no expression but his eyes, all eyes. Gorster half conscious. Benny now an animal. I knew Am would let him play. Gorster would not die, but Benny would fill his stomach. I turned half to my right and drew a huge ice spear from the snow. All in an instant, I drove the great spear point ahead of me like a battering ram, bracing myself against the right thigh. It struck Benny on the right side, just under his rib cage, and drove upwards through his stomach and broke inside. He pitched forward and lay still. Gorster lay on his back. I pulled another spear free and straddled him, still moving, driving the spear straight down through his throat. His eyes closed as the cold penetrated. Ellen must have realized what I had decided. Even as her fear gripped her, she ran at Nimdok with a short icicle. As he screamed and into his mouth, and the force of her rush did the job. His head jerked sharply, as if it had been nailed to the snow crust behind him. All in an instant, there was an eternity beat of soundless anticipation. I could hear Am draw in his breath. His toys had been taken from him. 3 of them were dead, could not be revived. He could keep us alive by his strength and talent, but he was not God. He could not bring them back. Ellen looked at me, her ebony flesh stark against the snow that surrounded us. There was fear and pleading in her manner, the way she looked, the way she held herself ready. I knew we had only a heartbeat before Anne would stop us. It struck her that she folded toward. It struck her, and she folded towards me, bleeding from her mouth. I could not read meaning into her expression. The pain had become too great, had contorted her face. But it might have been, "Thank you. It's possible. Please." Some hundreds of years have passed. I don't know. Am has been having fun for some time, accelerating and retarding my time sense. I will say the word now. Now. It took me 10 months to say now. I don't know. I think it has been some hundreds of years. He was furious. He wouldn't let me bury them. It didn't matter. There was no way to dig up the deck plates. He dried up the snow. He brought the night. He roared and sent the locusts. It didn't do a thing. They stayed dead. I'd had him. He was furious. I had thought Am hated me before. I was wrong. It was not even a shadow of the hate he now slavered from every printed circuit. He made certain I would suffer eternally and could not do myself in. He left my mind intact. I can dream, I can wonder, I can lament, I can remember all four of them. I wish, well, it doesn't make any sense. I know I saved them. I know I saved them from what has happened to me. I know I saved them. I know I saved them from what has happened to me, but still, I cannot forget killing them. Ellen's face. It isn't easy. Sometimes I want to. It doesn't matter. Am has altered me for his own peace of mind, I suppose. He doesn't want me to run at full speed into the computer banks and smash my skull, or hold my breath till I faint, or cut my throat on a rusted sheet of metal. There are reflective surfaces around here. I will describe myself as I see myself. I am a great soft jelly thing, smoothly rounded, with no mouth, with pulsing white holes filled by fog, where my eyes used to be, rubbery appendages that were once arms, bulks rounding down into legless humps of soft, slippery matter. I leave a moist trail when I move. Blotches of diseased, evil gray come and go on my surface, as though light is being beamed from within me. Outwardly dumb, I shamble about, a thing that could never have been known as human, a thing whose shape is so alien, a travesty that humanity becomes more obscene for the vague resemblance. Inwardly alone, here, living under the land, under the sea, in the belly of Am, who we created, because our time was badly spent, and we must have known unconsciously that he could do better. At least the four of them are safe at last. Am will be all the madder for it. It makes me a little happier. And yet, Am has won, simply. He has taken his revenge. I have no mouth, and I must scream.
The end. Well done. That was a hard story to read and a long story to read.
It was a bit long. It's good, though.
It's a great story. From my sporadic readings of the chat, I have a feeling nobody knows what the fuck is going on. So I'm going to tell you a synopsis. And that synopsis is, this is what I wrote. This is less a synopsis than a question. What does limitless hate look like in an immortal universe? That's one question. And then the synopsis I found elsewhere is, the last few survivors of humanity are the pathetic playthings of a sadistic AI. And that sums it up pretty good. So we have some thoughts. I don't know where you guys want to start, but I will say the ending when he says, "I have no mouth and I must scream." I don't know if you guys felt this way, but I think he's talking about himself, the narrator, but it's also a reference to Anne, the computer, because both of them are trapped. And part of the reason Anne is so angry is because he's trapped. He doesn't have any physical interaction with the world. He can't actually create, he can't act in the world personally. He can't feel. Um, so what he did to Ted was basically we sentenced him to the same kind of punishment of being forever and eternally trapped inside himself. So there's a symmetry.
100%. Like, I think that's a good reading. I think that I think there's it's a very existential story. I think the fact that he Am was created as a with the sole purpose of murder, with the sole purpose of wiping out. Well, not necessarily wiping out humanity, but murdering people as individuals. The he can't let them die, or that is the end of his purpose. They need to be alive for him to still have anything. So I think that really plays into your thing about the boredom, the inability to do anything, like the not having a mouth, like you
Yeah.
know.
Yep, exactly.
I also think it's really, yeah. In this same exact vein, when I was rereading it this afternoon, I kind of realized as well that it's not just that he like makes Ted what he is, but it's that he actually like creates Ted in his image,
Yeah.
and that plays exactly into that like he's God, he's a machine, he's like an kind of a mirror version of God in a way as like a creator, or maybe more accurately like the kind of destructive creation of a
Yeah.
kind uh, of a devil, maybe you could say. And I just found that like very like it's all there, but it's you kind of only find it right there at that end point, which is yeah, it's pretty brilliant.
Yeah, I agree. I think the story really comes together at the end with just that line and having that full symmetry with the title, and then realizing it's not just the first person narrator talking about himself, but there's like he's speaking on behalf of Am, and they're the only two things that exist in the world now, and they're both completely subject to their own internality forever. It's interesting because there's earlier we talked about in his biography that he was like a bullied Jewish kid, and he's like a self-identified atheist, but he did take a lot from the Jewish storytelling tradition. I mean, at one point he mentioned something, the Song of Moses or something. And
Yeah.
that's
And the burning bush.
and exactly. So there's the burning bush, and his, he gives a command. He says like you can eat or whatever. So there's like this inversion of like the Abrahamic religions, and it's really subtle. And I didn't get that the first time I read the story, but then reading again, especially in the context of his biography, it definitely came out.
And it's almost like a not just an inversion of like God, but like of like religious faith itself, where they're like sitting around the campfire, like telling themselves the same story over and over and over again, and they have to tell it in the right way, right? They have to start from the beginning. They have to start from the like an origin point to like get to the proper story that actually like appeals to their understanding of the situation they're in. It's really like, yeah, I mean, I guess I said it earlier, it's cynical. And yeah, I mean, that's just like what that is. It's just like this pure, like, ironic, like, flipping of like the entire reason people like have faith, like this kind of search for meaning that like is kind of doomed to failure, like doomed to like a suicide, essentially. It's
Mhm.
really insane.
But weirdly, the like this is obviously like an absurd case of a totally evil universe to exist in, like not just indifferent but evil, and yet the story as like a storytelling species, that's like the one thing that brings them some kind besides sex. It's like
Mm-hmm.
sex with Ellen or storytelling around a campfire, and those are like I think he's making a claim about like the fundamental nature of human beings. Like these are the things that sustain us, right? Like it's the hedonistic pleasures of the flesh, and then it's storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
The structure of the story is so, like, with the narration, is so strange. Like, so many times he talks about how he is the least changed mentally of the individuals, and all of that talk about how much control Am has about over, like, the minds of the individuals. Do we believe that his mind hasn't been changed? I
Mm.
think that's like a question that really rings in it. Do we believe that? Do we believe what in the story exists that, like, exists that we actually know happened in the ways in which we know Am has complete control over the minds of the individuals?
Right. Yeah,
I
this
think
is
that ties into your Descartes
Mm-hmm.
ego sum.
cogito ergo sum. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
um, it is true because it is kind of like, which itself is like the early brain in a vat thought experiment,
Mm-hmm.
which is also kind of like the Matrix. I think probably was inspired by Descartes' human, but yeah, it is like they could just be brains in vats. They may not have physical bodies. Um, and then, but how much has he changed is a good question. I think the way they objectify Ellen throughout the story is written hilariously with its directness. But it's interesting because they're sort of like, these are the five we're rooting for because these are like the remainder of humanity, and that yet in those moments they represent one of the basest emotions, which is just jealousy, especially sexual jealousy and objectification of women. And it's like, okay, like this is a machine that was built for war, but even in the last five survivors that represent humanity, there are these horrible base impulses.
But like, it specifically says that he changed their minds to make them into that, to make them into these kind of like archetypes of just the terribleness of mankind.
Yeah.
Like, are they actually that terrible, or is that something created by the by Am to have something to hate?
I
you know?
think it's like, but it's like there's nothing unfamiliar about the way they interact with each other, right? So it's like it's one of those things where it's like, okay, did he murder his wife because he was drunk, or would he have done it anyway? And like, or at least was the motivation there? Like, I feel like it's surfacing things that are unconscious, maybe repressed by social norms and mores. Um, but it is hilarious because you're right. Benny is given a giant cock, but he was a homosexual before and not an ape man. He was a professor. So you're right, he's changing them. He's actively changing them.
I got like really lost down this rabbit hole, like trying to like parse from the text what like we could say is like real, quote unquote, and like I don't know, there's something like really like appealing to me about how you just get so lost in the like hallucination of the machine. Like it does really like there's kind of like a form content thing going on here that I really like, that it just it's very you can't know. You can't know, and I as much as I like want to like try to figure out how he made a massive bird that like they can eat, like it's like just part of the kind of hallucinatory structure of it. This AI machine like trying to like craft something that makes his hate make sense. I guess I don't know. It's appealing as like a literary like a literary experience. Like it's very like it's like it has to be written. Like it has to be written in this way to like really get that across. I'm not sure that made sense, but
No, no,
that's the
totally. Form and content do make. I mean, he talked about this in his bio. He was part of the new waivers of the sci-fi writing community, and I think he abhorred the term sci-fi and fantasy, though he accepted many awards from like Hugo and Nebula. But he considered himself like a speculative fiction writer, first and foremost. Like there is in speculative fiction and like the new wave thing they're trying to do, the dissolution of form and content, and like yeah, it's like Slipstream for half the story, especially the latter half, where they're just literally starving and trying to get to the ice caverns to find cans that they know already out there. And weirdly, the bird seems to represent an element of freedom that Am himself doesn't have. Like the idea of flight conceptually. I mean, this is kind of like dream logic. Um, I would say that's very deliberate, or if not deliberate, then like collective unconscious manifestation.
Yeah, I feel like there's something like all of the talk about the biblical references and the talk about the bird and comparing it to other like it talked about Norse mythology and mentioned a couple of other traditions, and it is something that uh, in that mythology is our search for meaning. It does seem like if not freedom, at least a search for something, like trying to create this mythical creature, whatever mythical creature it is.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, yeah. It's also interesting because it kind of goes beyond nihilism. Like it's not just positing an indifferent universe. We touched on this, but like an actively evil universe that we're living in, and like there are Sisyphean sort of elements of like the fact that you have Ted who sacrifices himself. This is like the only meaningful act in that universe is to take life away from everybody else, not to improve life or give life or anything like that, but to take life away. And it's like in that act, which seems counterintuitive.
That's where I really feel like the unreliable narrative is. That really feels like something because he's talking about how much like he believes that they were saying thank you. He believes that they were glad he was murdering them,
Right.
and I don't know if we should believe him. I like,
Interesting. I hadn't thought of that.
yeah, I don't know if we should believe him. I don't know if he's saying that to justify it to himself or if that is actually the truth of the situation.
Mm.
I mean, it's hell either way, but I don't know. I don't know what to trust.
But you're also poking at a question, which is like, how much suffering is worth enduring for life to feel like it's worth living? Or from an evolutionary perspective, like how much suffering can you tolerate to, the just this impetus to preserve your existence?
Yeah,
I think, are they thanking him? Are they happy to be dead? Or would they have almost preferred to just live, period, despite being endlessly subjected to suffering for eternity?
I think that he is both. I think the narrator is both. I think he's much like Ellis. Like I think there are some things. I think he's a bad person. I think everyone in the story is a bad person. I think that's kind of intentional, and I think there's something that he's trying to create meaning out
Right.
of the badness in a certain way.
Yeah. And also, like, why did he choose these five people specifically? We'll never really know.
I think it's he and the main character to kind of support your point, Alex. I think like he pitches this as like an either an act of like beating, like defeating Am, right, or almost an act of revenge, right? Like he's taking revenge on the god that his people created, that has now created his conditions, right? There's this like really like interesting kind of like relation, like there's almost like an economy to it, like this like giving back and forth of the same like suffering that was initially given. It's very yeah, I just keep saying it's like interesting, and that's what it is. It just like it kind of feels like a knot that you can't really like undo. It just like
The
every
whole
piece of it,
story.
yeah, it's really crazy.
It does feel like a catch-22 to just like to die
Mhm.
or to exist in this world of perpetual suffering. It's nauseating to think about. It leads to another interesting question because I think this story was published in 80 or something thereabouts because obviously it was written during or around the Cold War. And I think Am kind of represents like pure intelligence without any moral compass. And
Mhm.
probably that was on a lot of people's mind at the time. So the pursuit of perfection is it antithetical to empathy? I wrote this in the margin of intellectual perfection. Yeah, so I don't know. He's a perfectionist. This is something that's mentioned. He can create anything, but he has nothing to guide that intelligence towards the moral aim. I mean, what is moral? But yeah, I think that's kind of interesting. I think it's definitely a critique of scientism.
I just looked it up, and I am shocked to say that this story is much earlier than we thought. 1967.
Holy shit! So he was he was kind of avant-garde.
100%.
This would have been around the time that Vonnegut was writing Cat's Cradle, right?
I think, yeah, definitely. Oh man. Oh, we keep coming back to Vonnegut.
No, this is like a bleaker Vonnegut story. Like, especially near the end, the fact that he's turned into a blob of jelly. Like, it feels very. I mean, really, like Cat's Cradle feels like almost the most analogous.
Yeah, it's a very hopeless story.
It's a very hopeless story.
Yeah, oh my god, it's a hopeless story that doesn't have the humor of Vonnegut to cut that hope, like to cut the hopelessness. You know?
Yeah, the humor is in mostly the grossness and like the horrible behaviors and the body horror.
I definitely think that there's obviously a really like strong vein of like worries about World War III, technology, science, but that line at the end that like really is like kind of insane. Living under the land, under the sea, in the belly of Am, who we created because our time was badly spent, and we must have known unconsciously that he could do it better. Like that's crazy. Like that is like a wild thing to say. Like it's like it goes beyond like a kind of desire for like perfect knowledge to like the use of like a person as like a thing that even like exists temporally. It's like it's really nuts. I don't know. It's crazy. I've said it many times.
Might be misreading it, but it kind of sounds like he's implying that like getting rid of almost every human was like the most merciful thing it could do in a way. It's like it's a honeycomb. Like you had what is it? Chinese am, Russian am, American am, and it's a honeycomb built underground under the world, and they eventually all just joined, and that's how we attained consciousness. So we sidestepped the hard question of like how consciousness arose, but we end up with just a honeycomb encircling. So like every nation of human beings is a war nation, and then it creates this thing that's just ultimately like, well, you all want to kill each other. Why don't I just kill all of you?
Mm-hmm.
Done with it. But that line, Zach, is very Vonnegut. Like
it is.
That's those few lines, like that. I think that's the part when I was like, wow, this is very, like, it's like Ligotti, but Vonnegut.
Mm-hmm.
Ligotti's another good analog to what's happening here.
I think I'm going to read a quick passage when they talk about his name, because I think there is a very deliberate, obviously, reference to Descartes. For anyone who missed this the first time, these are everywhere, and these are the line breaks. And when they're decoded, it says, I think therefore I am, or cogito ergo sum. It alternates between the two. So we have a direct reference to Descartes when Gorster is telling Benny what happened, the sequence of events that led them to where they are. So he says, quote, at first it meant allied master computer, and then it meant adaptive manipulator. And later on it developed sentience and linked itself up, and they called it an aggressive menace. But by then it was too late, and finally it called itself Am, emerging intelligence, and what it meant was I am, cogito ergo sum, I think, therefore I am. So he just, even in the way Ellison names it, he goes from like a tool and an instrument, and then eventually he becomes the subject and perhaps God in this world, in this universe. And I think that's a very interesting trajectory. And it does, I think Ellison's purposely playing on Descartes' demon, which is the famous thought experiment. Like, you know, all of existence could just be a demon trying to trick you. And so like, what could you still be certain of in that if everything else in the physical world was illusory? But in this case, you have Am attaining self-consciousness, and then instead of building knowledge through starting with like foundational knowledge, epistemology, he's building hell for everybody in it. And unlike Descartes' demon, who's sort of like a passive figure that's hidden in the shadows, you don't know he's aware, Am kind of wants recognition, and he's continually reminding you that he's manipulating you and controlling you.
I love that. I will point out we're getting close to 9:20. I know Zach had some commitments. Are you? How are you doing?
Yes, I will sign off now. Thanks a
Okay.
bunch, y'all. It was a really
Yeah, it
fun
was lovely.
conversation.
Like
Yeah,
I would love to chat again. Yeah, it
definitely.
was
I would be
very good.
so very, very, very happy to. This was a lot of fun and
Yeah.
great story, great pick. I've been wanting to read this forever, so this was
Oh yeah,
the best
Oh,
opportunity, coolest way to
oh,
do so. So
fantastic.
yeah,
you
yeah,
uploaded it. I think in the last
yeah,
stream you
definitely.
do that one. I was like, yeah, okay, all right, that's
Yeah,
awesome. Yep, thanks for joining us, and definitely
yeah, of
let's
course.
do this again.
Definitely. Sounds great. Have a good one. Have a good
All right,
rest of
Zach.
your
Yeah, you
conversation too.
too.
Bye.
Yeah, he had some really good points. I was happy to like to hear some of them. It definitely made me think of the story in a different way.
Yeah, no, that was great. I think having three people is a cool way to bounce ideas off each other. Um, in the next episode, which I think will be in 2 weeks from now,
Mhm.
it will be Will, who will be guest starring, and we'll be doing the Clarice Lispector story.
I'm actually kind of excited for it. I just read it a couple of days ago, and I think it's going to be a very fun one to do.
Yeah, what were your thoughts initially? You said
Um,
funny. You called it like ennui with.
it oh god, what did I say? It made me think of proof rock quite a bit. It made me think of a suicidal proof rock. In the I don't know, it's good.
It is good, and Will was insisting we read it, so I'm happy he did that. So Will,
Yeah,
yeah, he's shouting for Lispector in the chat.
yeah, he has good taste.
I happened to accidentally print 200 pages worth of Schopenhauer's essays at work. So I was thinking that's a lot of potential.
Okay.
If you want, I can send you the PDF of them, and maybe we could even just do like one essay a week or something.
Yeah, I'd be down. I
It's
feel
really like,
like God, I feel like I haven't read much Schopenhauer. I feel like I come to Schopenhauer through Bernard Shaw, who was
oh, weird. The playwright,
yeah, yeah, the
George
playwright.
Bernard Shaw.
He like was very much inspired by Schopenhauer.
He's
Uh,
Canadian, right?
yeah,
I've never seen or read any of his plays.
I there's some good ones. I liked Pygmalion and Man and Superman. Uh, oh my God, what's her name? And uh, I'm forgetting the one about the Salvation Army individual. It's good. They're weird. I like them.
What the hell are you talking about?
One of Bernard Shaw's plays is
Oh,
about
okay.
somebody in the Salvation Army.
Um, a play would be interesting if we had enough people. We could each read lines.
Uh, yes, but plays tend to be a bit longer.
Yeah, you're
There
right.
might,
Yeah, fuck it.
there's a couple of. Oh, actually,
Henry's Caligula, maybe.
I do have a recommendation for a play that I think could be done in like 30 to 40 minutes. The Pillow Man.
I'll write that down.
Yeah, look that up. It's a very good one. The Pillow Man or the Zoo play by Edward Albee, I think, is also pretty short.
Sure.
But just things to think about. Anyways, so next week, God, what was the fella's name? What was her name?
Clarice Lispector. So yeah. Oh, Mickey Roberts loves the Pillow Man. Waiting for
Pillow
the
Man's
right
really
to
good.
long will.
The Pillow Man is one of the best plays one of the best. I don't know when it came out, but I think after 2000, it's one of the best plays I've read from the last 20 years, 20, 30
Interesting.
years.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm down. Mickey Roberts says the fire in the firmament.
Oh, interesting. Well, I'll have to look it up.
We will be eventually book clubbing this.
I got my copy. One
you do?
second.
Awesome. Yeah, no, this is definitely one of my favorite writers of all time, even though he's written 4 novels and I love all of them. One of the best satirists, alternate historians, novelist, French, Le Rondinette, the 7th function of language. I think that's it. Alex, you have anything you want to say you have coming out, or no? You've been quiet.
No, wow, God, I feel I'll talk to you later. I've got some I had some personal stuff going on, but I'll fill you in later. Okay. So I feel like I've been busy. I put out a stupid erotica thing that I made when I was like
I didn't
20.
watch it, but yeah, I saw you posted yourself reading erotica. So I'm gonna check that out. I recommend everyone check that out if you want to have goosebumps on your genitals.
I was trying to do something kind of like I wrote it in like 2012-ish. I just read seen Chuck Tingle for the first time, and I was like, you know what? Yeah. I could do that. Yeah. And so I wrote a short story about, and I tried to make the writing as bad as possible because I think it makes it funnier. But it is about an architect who wants to fuck buildings, and I enjoyed writing it, and I read it. It made me laugh. I thought I'd share it.
Okay, I look forward to listening to you read it.
I hope you enjoy it.
Yeah, I certainly will. As for me, I have more philosophical satire coming. And then I had a serious story I was working on because Barnes challenged me to write something about camping and a vixen.
Interesting.
Into wildland firefighting and a ghost. But I hope he's not too mad. Fuck buildings. All buildings consent. It's going to be controversial in 20 years.
I wrote it after the first time that I saw a documentary on the woman who married the Eiffel Tower.
Oh, it was I remember that.
Yeah, right?
I don't know much about it. I remember that happening.
Oh, it happened.
I guess with that, there's probably nothing else really to say. We've gone so far afield that I can't recall what we discussed and didn't discuss. So this concludes episode 3 of, what are we calling this?
Oh God, the Void? Something about the Void?
But notes to the Void?
Notes to the Void.
Okay. No, but okay. So thank you everybody for talking. And we hope to see you again in 2 weeks when we'll be reading Will G's pornographic journal entries. Do you know about the man who jumped off the Eiffel Tower knowing his parachute wouldn't work? No, I know about a man who jumped out of a plane because he thought he was wearing a parachute, but he's just wearing camera gear. All right. Good night, everybody.
Yeah, good night.